You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious!
Now, people might wonder why we are going to speak to this gentleman, because this is an event that happened 35 years ago about, and at the time is one of the big national crises of an industrial campaign which saw the airlines come to a standstill, or the domestic airlines in Australia come to a standstill because of a industrial campaign which was headed by the President of the Australian Federation of Air Pilots, who is Bryan MacCarthy, who is sitting opposite me at the minute. And Bryan, in an industrial campaign which was probably for wages and conditions, a push for wages and conditions, it was called a pilot fatigue case, and also, if I've got that written down somewhere, it was a pilot fatigue case and something else, but it was just wages and conditions. And he took 1,640 odd pilots out of service, and it threw the nation into a crisis, and a industrial crisis. So I thought we would like to speak to Bryan how he handled that and how life has been since then. But I wanted to ask him a question without notice. If you were running the Pilots Association now, would you let them fly Boeing aeroplanes? Because there's a hell of a problem going on in the States with doors falling off them and landing gear falling off, and whether that's been highly exaggerated overseas. I know two people who have been whistleblowers at Boeing have been deceased. I'm not so sure if Boeing have had them deceased, but that just seems a coincidence that they've blown the whistle on Boeing and now don't live anymore. Would you let your pilots fly Boeing aircraft? Don't answer that. It's just a tongue-in-cheek thing, because it seems extraordinary that Boeing, who are having this much trouble with their planes. Now, Bryan, how did all this start? You became, at 41 years of age, you were elected the president of the Federation of Air Pilots, and you must have thought... did you become elected the president because you wanted to take this industrial action, or did it become apparent when you became the president that this was nonsense? The wages and conditions were horrendous and being run by a duopoly, I presume, which was Ansett and TAA or stroke Qantas.
Well, it didn't involve Qantas initially. They flew over our routes, and so did all other international airlines as part of it.
So you're calling Qantas an international airline as opposed...
Then.
Yes, then. Yeah. So it was TAA and Ansett, was it?
Yeah, TAA were the domestic government airline,
yep,
and Qantas were the international airline. And we were approaching a possible deregulation, and I think the people at Ansett, aided by the Prime Minister, had decided that a long time in advance, the best thing they could do is try and somehow put TAA in with the Qantas management, and then that would obviously mean that Ansett had to go international. And so I believe that most of the dispute, as far as the airlines were concerned, was to have that come about. And during the dispute itself, I think TAA were virtually told to sit back and follow the orders from Ansett.
That's so Reg Ansett, that was his...
No, not Reg. No, it was Peter Abels.
Oh, yes, Sir Peter Abels,
yes,
who I think went on to run TNT Transport, didn't he?
Well, he was running it then.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. And it was co-owned by that and News Corp, Rupert Murdoch.
So Reg was just using his name at that stage, wasn't
yeah, well, it was still called Ansett.
Yeah, that's right.
But he'd
and for people listening to this, what's the significance of Ansett going out of business? When did they go out of business?
Well, if you want my honest opinion, I think they sent themselves broke spending so much money during the dispute.
No, maybe, but I
bills.
was just a fact that Ansett went out of business on the date of 9/11. Mm-hmm. When the planes flew into the Twin Towers, Ansett ceased to be. There's a coincidence for you, John.
And then certainly
just as John Locko, we're speaking to here. We've spoken to John. So, Bryan, you took the decision that you took umbrage, I presume. Your members took umbrage. You were just the spokesman for them, but they took umbrage at the fact that you were being used by the political process to... your members weren't just being used and not getting paid to do it and working long hours and not getting compensated for it. That's how most strikes start, isn't it? And you weren't on strike, really, were you? You say you were just you just withdrew your services.
Oh no! In fact, we were flying 9 to 5 because they were treating us as though we were, 9 to 5 workers.
That's
so we
right.
said, well, if that's what you want, we'll fly 9 to 5. And it was much to their annoyance, I think, that during that period that it operated, every passenger probably didn't get to where he wanted to get on time,
That's
or the
right.
time that he thought of, but they got there.
Yeah, so airlines don't operate between 9 to 5. They operate
Correct.
all hours of and so much so that so you said that we're going to fly from 9 to 5, and that went over like a wrought iron hang glider, if you'll pardon the pun. That went over like a wrought iron hang glider with the industry and the government and the employers, and because domestic travel came to a standstill.
Well, I don't think the airlines were quite ready for that. It was sort of something out of left field, and so in the end, they found that the problem with it was that they could still operate, not to the way they wanted to or the way passengers wanted to, but people could still get from A to B.
So it threw the country into turmoil. That'd be fair to say, wouldn't it?
Yes, but I think you've got to go back a little bit further, Sam, and that is that there was a time when the government were trying to go with wage restraint, as they always do.
Yeah.
But as their own remuneration tribunal do it, on December 1988, or late December 1988, when everyone's on Christmas and nobody's taken much notice, the politicians received or gave themselves, or the tribunal did, a 30% pay rise.
Yep.
And at that time, TAA were introducing the 737, and they had, I think, misjudged the arrival the management had, and so they needed a lot of help from the pilots, and particularly the 737 training and checking captains, to introduce that aircraft as seamlessly and as fast as they could. And so we said we would assist in that regard and help them there, but when the 737 was up and running, then we had told them that in about September we would be seeking, not just for that, but we would be seeking, because we'd foregone negotiations on two previous times, to give them a bit more time to breathe.
So when the 737s came in, you thought, Bryan, did you not? Well, this is a good chance to just mark my territory. We will train the pilots and fly the 737s, but you better pay us to do it. You sort of held a gun to their head.
No, it wasn't like that at all. In fact, we had done as much as we could to help them, and the thing that most people forget, and I just want to go back to your original start there. I was elected by the rank and file, a vote of all the members, and all during this dispute, pre-dispute, and then while it was on, we held meetings in every major capital city, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Adelaide, for the pilots. And at those meetings, they were...
Unanimous support.
95%. They were asked to either support or not support a motion, and it was a secret ballot, and and the results were normally 98 to 95% in favour. And if somebody wanted to stand up and say something contrary, well, I sort of encourage that, because I believe that if one person stands up, there may be, 4 or 5 or 10 others who might well be thinking the same thing, but, a little bit not so game to get up and say it.
So you just acted on the wishes, of course, of your members.
Correct.
You didn't try and mark your territory at all. You just complied with what the rank and file wanted you to do.
Put it this way, I was a pilot, am a pilot,
Yep.
and I understood a lot of their feelings about because they were my feelings as well. However, it has to be if the majority thinks that way, well, I'm happy to support them.
So looking back, would you think that the rank and file, was it irresponsible to do that, or what did it achieve in the end? It achieved much better pay and conditions for the pilots, or because?
Well, I put it this way: they said they couldn't pay us 30%, but they paid the foreigners who they brought in and the pilots who returned more money than we'd even claimed.
Yeah, so just in case people haven't been aware of this, the then Prime Minister, Bob Hawke, enlisted the services of international aviators to come in and take up the slack to replace the 1,640-odd pilots who had withdrawn their services, which seems a bit ironic, seeing Bob was the president of the ACTU at one stage and was a great union man, but seemed to turn his back on the unions and fight you, who were doing the just what he had been doing in another field in another time.
Well, I think he sort of had a bit of a vested interest in helping his good friend Peter Abels. If you want to know how close all these people are, you might remember sometime later when there was a special meeting in Canberra to decide when Paul Keating would take over from Bob Hawke, and the person supporting Paul Keating was Bill Kelty, the head of the ACTU, and the person supporting Bob Hawke was Peter Abels.
So I was...
And both of those gentlemen later finished up on the board of the Reserve Bank.
I was amused at this. It says Captain Bryan, I'm reading this, Captain Bryan MacCarthy said Mr Hawke's comments about the pilots earlier this week had hardened their attitudes, and he just wished he hadn't said anything. And I wish a whole lot of people hadn't as well. Hawke said this week that the pilots were trying to glorify themselves and that bus drivers had as much responsibility as airline pilots. Well, there's a ridiculous statement. Getting a bus and travel from here to Dandenong in it, you're probably not going to worry about anything happening, but get up in a plane and see how you go.
Well, I don't know what he had against bus drivers, but it was, something that was quite stupid to say, quite honestly. But one of the comments that he made, secondly, he then came out and said we only work 8 hours a week, but then followed up a little bit later by decrying us and say these people even enjoy their jobs. Now, if everybody in this country enjoyed their job, we wouldn't have any problems at all.
Yeah, exactly right.
So just on the bus and the train...
This is John Locko.
The bus and air travel, the great Muhammad Ali said when asked, why do you go by bus rather than plane, because he had a fear of flying, he said, because when a bus breaks down, it don't fall no 30,000 feet.
Yeah, well, that is obviously the context of what the ridiculous statement that bus drivers have as much responsibility. So now you were branded, Bryan, as militant and single-minded and uncompromising. I'd say necessary traits to be involved in doing what you do. I'd wear that as a badge of honour if I was a union leader. Militant, single-minded and uncompromising.
Well, not really. I certainly wouldn't say uncompromising, because part of when you negotiate a contract, you put in what you want and the company what they want, and then you sit down and you work it out. And one of the things we always did with every contract we negotiated is that we included productivity because our members were frontline staff everywhere. So, I'm not saying we knew everything, but we could see where things could improve and what we could do to help. And so that always became part of the discussion, and it was actually quite amicable. In fact, our negotiations in the past that we've had with TAA, and I didn't run any of the ones with Ansett, but they were always be able to resolve the matter on, in the end, a pay rise for cost of living, but then productivity was included. And the other thing too, in those days, you claimed after the event, so you claimed for the last 3 years, and so if you got exactly what you asked for, which you never did because you always had to put in
an amber claim, we call it.
Yes, so you always had to do that because that was the only way the Industrial Relations Commission could then say it's a industrial dispute, and you've got to handle it certain ways.
So how did you handle you must have been persona non grata with certain sections of the community. How did you handle the pressure involved in doing it? Because I think the airlines issued a writ about you to your organisation, breach of contract. They threatened a breach of contract writ if you did not stop the industrial action. Is that correct?
Oh, well, they took us to the Supreme Court of Victoria, and it was a trial by judge alone, and the judge found that...
Podbean, your message amplified.
Ready to share your message with the world? Start your podcast journey with Podbean.
Podbean, the AI-powered all-in-one podcast platform.
Thousands of businesses and enterprises trust Podbean to launch their podcasts.
Use Podbean to record your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to optimize your podcast.
Use Podbean AI to turn your blog into a podcast.
Use Podbean to distribute your podcast everywhere.
Launch your podcast on Podbean today.
He cited 5 individuals and the organisation, and the fine was $6.5 million.
And you were one of the individuals?
Correct.
And what happened to the, I presume you didn't pay the, no. What happened to that? That was just a... Well,
it hung around like the sword of Damocles, I guess you could say. But I wasn't paying any of that, and neither were the other 4 individuals named.
Was one of those individuals your ally who was just... Why can't I read my writing here? The man who was on the part of the Collingwood on the VFL. Were you part of Collingwood's VFL? Who was that, John?
You may be talking
Terry O'Connell.
Terry O'Connell.
Oh yeah,
was he an ally of yours?
Oh yeah. Well, Terry was our chief executive.
Yep.
I was the president. We had 2 vice presidents, John Raby and Noel Holt. They were involved, and another pilot who was representing the IPEC pilots, Terry Seedsman. And we were another pilot, former president of the Federation, Tony Fitzsimons. We were the ones cited as the names.
So it says, was Terry O'Connell something to do with Collingwood, was he?
Well, he barracked for Collingwood. I had more to do with the Collingwood.
He wasn't on the board or anything?
No. Well, I was the original secretary of one of the coteries there, the Magpie Club, when they started up.
I see, yep.
And in fact, one of the coaches that I had to organise the Guernsey presentation the night that Mark Williams became captain, and John Cale came over from Port Adelaide to be the coach. And I got to know John quite well, and he was he was a supporter of us.
Thinking about rebuilding your cat machine or keeping your undercarriage or hydraulics running like new whilst controlling costs? Now's the time. Take advantage of 0% interest for 24 months with secured or unsecured financing on CAT certified and dealer rebuilds, new cat undercarriage, or repairs on your existing undercarriage and hydraulics works on your machine. Give your machine a second life at a fraction of the cost. T's and C's apply. Contact your CAT dealer today to learn more.
Nice guy.
Yeah, so the government, Bob Hawke's government, then enlisted the RAAF. Did they engage the services of the RAAF to fly people around?
Correct. Well, there's only been two governments that have ever used the military in an industrial dispute, and they've both been Labor, and one was against the Wharfies, and the other was against us.
So what did you make of? Well, Bob Hawke was he was a great union man and seemed to have just completely done an about face on stopping and taking action against the unions.
Well, I think he was great for himself before he was great for anybody else. But but many of us were particularly disgusted with using the military because, I spent 6 years in the military, and so did many other pilots who'd spent time in Vietnam and other places, and to find this happening was just quite obnoxious.
If you had it over, would you have done it again, or did it ruin your life personally? And the 1,640 people got blacklisted. I know they were reinstated some 12 years later, weren't they?
Not really. No,
not really.
There was 20% of them across the floor, for the want of a better word, and the rest of us were hung out to dry. Well, they would say we hung ourselves out to dry. That's a matter of opinion, but also the only option then was for people to go overseas. And the government, through the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and every other, was actually contacting airlines and governments in other countries saying, don't employ these people. The funny thing about that was that I think the people they contacted had a bit of an idea about the dispute and certainly knew about the pilots, and they were more than happy to take them.
Yeah, because they were more competent than most of the...
Oh, well, they were... We found when we went overseas, we were flying domestically in Australia, and then when we went overseas, everything we did was international. And the training we had received by our fellow pilots during our careers had fitted us out so well that... we could seamlessly fit in. So and under this new regime of diversity, inclusion, and equity, the standards of flight controllers and airline pilots are being diminished to fit. I'm not asking, but it's being diminished to fit that narrative that everyone. But if you're going to diminish the standards of flight control. Air traffic controllers and pilots, that's about the worst thing that you can do is lower the standards on that. Now,
you'd think so.
Well,
yes.
I can't speak for the air traffic controllers, but for the pilots, the annoying bit about it was that in the past, and this is long past now, it was the flight operations department that would interview and recruit new pilots. Now, prior to the days of Deborah Wardley, and I know Deborah, she's a very nice person, her applying and then Reg knocking it back, it was great that she won that and got in because, put it this way, and I don't care whether it's pilots or any job, if you want 20 and interview 50 and the best 20 are women, well, you take them. If the best 20 are men, you take them. Or if there's 50-50, you take the ones that are best.
But that's not how it works, is it?
No.
It's diversity and inclusion, and it's not the meritocracy. It's the quota system. Bryan, not asking you to comment on that. That's just a fact. Now, John...
Bryan, I was going to say, ultimately, who dismissed the pilots? Hawke gets the credit for it, but he did employ you, so how could he didn't dismiss you? It was the bosses that dismissed you.
That was... that was the thing that probably annoyed Abels to no end, is that what they did when the 9 to 5 wasn't working their way, they then decided to stand down, sack and sue individual pilots. Now, they didn't. The ones they stood down, sacked and sued weren't necessarily. Some of them were on long-term sick leave. Some were on holidays. Some were on days off. It was so indiscriminate, but I think it was deliberate to really get up the noses of people, and so they were issued with writs. So that means your house, your savings, everything is up for grabs. And so we had meetings to inform the pilots. I know I thrashed it out over many hours or more than that with Terry O'Connell and others in our negotiating group. And on the advice of the lawyers, and I still think it was the right advice, the only way that they could really say that you could protect yourself was to resign. And we all resigned, apart from the ones that were sacked earlier, stood down, sacked and sued. Everybody else, well, not everybody else, there were some who didn't, and some of them might have been management pilots who were members of the Federation, and I know that one of them in particular went to Abels and said, look, we've got to get the pilots back. And Abels told him that they'll only come back one at a time and on their knees. And when he heard that, he thought, well, that's it for me, I'm out of here as well.
In terms of industrial espionage, Bryan, were you subjected to any of that sort of stuff?
Oh, well, our building was bugged, or they were able to eavesdrop in there, and also my home and my telephone. I can remember we had, because the office was, I decided to have a meeting in my home in Melbourne, Hawthorn, and there was about time for the meeting, and I thought I'd see if anyone's walking up the street or a bit lost. And I walked out there, and not in front of me, but in front of our next door neighbours, there's this little Morris Mini Miner, and it's got more arrows on it than a Russian prawn trawler. And I looked at this guy, and he sort of took a bit of a start. Next minute, he started and beetled off. And then every time with our phone, you'd hear it, because in those days there wasn't mobile phones. It was just, you'd hear it jingling and that, and you pick it up thinking, and then I'm listening to a conversation from John Raby, who was one of the vice presidents, and so what they'd done is they had bugged our phones. And so I remember doing an interview with AM. He used to do quite a lot with them, and they were the days when they used to be able to get both sides of the argument.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the end of it, they said, it was the AM program, they said, is there anything you want to say? And I said, well, I suppose it's a free country. We're all entitled to have our homes and our phones bugged. And that caused a bit of a stir, and Hawke came out and said, no, I didn't do that. And I thought, well, you've got to say that. You're not going to own up to that one, are you?
Say that.
And Bryan, did you incur the mandatory death threats?
I had some of those, and in fact, Johnny, he was enlisted. A
little bit of security on security duty.
Well, I think you'd arrive at about 4:30 in the afternoon and then leave after I got home, although I think a few times you sat down and had a meal with us.
Lovely meals.
Yeah. So it was intimidating, and how did it affect you and your family? And you still, I noticed you had a 20-year reunion back in 2009 of the event. Was there a reasonable turnout for that, and we were still looked at in favour of what's happened? Because a lot of people probably did it tough during the.
Oh yeah, very tough. But we have regular get-togethers now anyway. About once a quarter now, so we have about 4 of those. And I know in Queensland they've got one coming up soon. They have them regularly, and the whole feeling is that some people want to point towards me or other officials of the Federation, but the pilots themselves, 1,647 of us, or of them, and I was one. It wasn't we didn't make the decisions. We always went back with for private ballots. There was a discussion there, and at the end of those, if somebody had something to say that they didn't like what was happening, well, they said it, and at the end of that, we were able to thrash out what the pilots wanted, and that's what we voted for.
So you probably had a genuine case, not just a bogus, not just an ambered claim, because you were flying Fokker Friendships in 1974 and getting $5,000 a year to do it, which seems in today's money is probably about $35,000, but not a lot of money for someone who's had to train and put themselves through the hoops of learning.
It's interesting. I flew 6 years in the army, and my wife and I were living in an army Maori quarter at Oakey, Western Queensland, and she had a job in the local shire. So between us, we were on about, I'd say, $13,000 a year, and moved down to Melbourne, and my wife couldn't work because she was having our first baby, and so the salary there at TA was $5,400 a year, and so I took a couple of part-time jobs working in a pub, because I knew a couple of people in there, and they said, well, if you need any spare work, you can do it here.
You talk about reunions. You have a reunion. Probably the most famous reunion every year or every few years is Mr. Sullenberg, who landed the plane on the Hudson River, and all the people he saved, they gather around just to say, well, thanks very much, we're here because that's an incredible thing. If that's an amazing thing that the plane didn't, how would that happen? Could you have landed a plane on the Hudson River without it breaking up?
Well, you would hope so, but he did. And well, here's the thing. He was actually an ex Air Force pilot.
He was,
yeah.
Yep.
And then he goes to work in the airlines, and he was flying the A320, and it's not part of the initial checklist. My understanding is that, and all pilots will do it, if you've got a problem like that, first thing you do is start this auxiliary power unit, because it'll operate it'll give you power to operate your electrics, your hydraulics, and any other flight system. So he did that. It wasn't on the initial checklist, and then as they went through it, they were able to go through it because that's what they'd done. So, it's he did an amazing job. But if you, I haven't read any book, but I've seen the movie, and if the movie is sort of a little bit correct, it was interesting how the government agencies and the airline companies tried to shaft him, because if the captain's still alive, you've got someone to sue.
Yes, that's exactly right. No, it was a fantastic movie.
Yep.
Now did you write a book? You didn't write the book Wage? Is it Justice Kirby delivered a lecture about, was it wage determination or union extermination? What did he did a lecture about? Was that? Did you write that book?
It wasn't a book; it was a paper, and I delivered that at the Wollongong University.
Yes.
And it was the Sir Justice Kirby. Every year they have a memorial lecture, and I was the one that gave it that year.
You gave the lecture on wage determination or union extermination. Yeah. So Justice Kirby just oversaw the lecture, did he?
No, he wasn't there.
Memorial lecture. In the name of Sir Justice Kirby.
Maybe he has written.
No, that's John. You've cleared that up. So you gave the lecture, and to whom?
The Wollongong University.
Yeah,
and in fact, for quite a while after, during and after the dispute, although as far as I was concerned it was still going, I was asked to go to a lot of universities and lecture their graduating law classes. That was their interest. And
did you have international support from affiliated airline associations or from affiliated unions from overseas when you took the action to withdraw the pilots?
The AFAP was part of the IFALPA, which is the International Federation of Air Pilots, and I've chaired a couple of their conferences from time to time before the dispute. But yeah, we had a convention every year. Actually, it's interesting, the way, people try to infer various things in that. And the date of this conference always had to be after Ramadan, because we couldn't have it during it, but have it after it. So it was interesting how, as a group, you can look after everybody. And the difference in the Australian Federation of Air Pilots, as you correctly pronounced it before, we weren't the airline pilots. We covered general aviation as well as the International Federation of Airline Pilots is all airline. But we were, I guess there was ourselves and the Americans and the British were fairly prominent in that area.
It doesn't happen very often, does it? Does it happen very often that pilots go on, I know it happens a little in America, but pilots go on strike and take the whole system out of action? Because in 1966, the International Association of Machinists, I don't know who machinists are, but they took the airline system in America out of for 43 days. They struck and the airlines didn't fly for 43 days in 1966. It doesn't happen very often that because it's a very serious thing, isn't it? Really.
Well, the biggest turnaround, I think when aviation really started to change, and it'll always start first in America, I think, and that was there were some people who decided they had a look at the airlines and they decided they could move in there, and there was a lot of rich pickings. Frank Lorenzo was the start of the pioneer and all of that, if you could say. And the first thing they do is go in and send the airline into Chapter 11. So that meant they didn't have to pay their debts. So that was a series of many of the huge change around in America. Now in Australia, it was deregulation was coming up, and there were certain people that could see deregulation working for them, and one was Abels and Murdoch. And in fact, they had worked closely together before when at the dispute for the print union in England at Wapping, which was run by Abels, for the want of a better word, Murdoch for the want of a better word. The company he used to transport all the printing machines from Fleet Street and out to Wapping was TNT.
So where are we with the airline industry? Just to finish this off, the A380s, they were going to be the big thing to come forward, and then they decided that they were too expensive, and the smaller 777s with the two engines.
787, put it this way, technology. I think the A380 wasn't helped much by COVID. No, because then. I think the whole world took a backward step, and why we allowed that to happen, I don't know, but exactly it did. So that took a backward step. The other one, it's a big aircraft. It requires a lot of space at any terminal. There's a lot of passengers. You got 4 engines, quite expensive, whereas the 787 and the Airbus have got the A350s and others. They're 2-engine, much more technology, and the airlines can find, I think, that they're a better option.
And in this day and age, Bryan, when we're asked to drive electric cars, it seems ridiculous that if you look at the number of container ships and aeroplanes flying around the world, what we do in our cars is negligible, because you're never going to have a solar-powered aeroplane fly from here to America, are you?
Oh, well, I think,
battery-operated.
Yeah, well, the last of that was the old four-master sailing ships, wasn't it, that used the wind.
And I don't know, did you ever fly on the Concorde?
No.
Well, I've got one up on you there. I flew from JFK to Heathrow on the Concorde, and can say that was an experience. But that went out of business, not because, well, probably because it wasn't profitable, but it hit a metal bar on the runway. It didn't have any mechanical defect. It just hit a metal bar on the runway and crashed.
The supersonic boom they used to.
They wouldn't allow that to. Wouldn't allow that to go over Australia with the supersonic boom because the indigenous people said it upset the spirits. Seriously,
over the wide expanses of Australia, they wouldn't allow a supersonic.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Fantastic.
This is the world we live in, Brian.
Sam, can I just ask Brian a question?
Please, I would hope you ask him.
6'5", I sit in the economy seat. Why don't they take out a row of seats and charge us 5% more per ticket and give us a bit of extra leg room, all of us, so we can travel in economy in comfort? Why do we have to go through the horrific experience that economy travel is?
Well, you'll find there are people who travel for business, but there's a lot of, I'll say, normal travellers, holidays, and they've got families. They're looking for the cheapest or the most economical fare. Now, at the moment, there's business class on, an hour flight. Seems a bit pointless to pay the money, but if someone else is paying, well, why not? And then I can speak for Virgin anyway. They've got an Economy X, which is more space, but you pay more for it. And then as you go back down the aircraft, they're trying to get as many people as they can to make enough money to pay for the fuel and all the operating.
I'd argue under the Sale of Goods Act that an airline seat is not merchantable. That's what I'd argue.
Is not what?
It's not merchantable, fit for purpose.
Merchantable?
Merchantable, Sam.
Is that
under the Sale of Goods Act, Section 19 of the Sale of Goods Act, any service you provide must be merchantable. In other words, fit for purpose. I never thought
I'd hear a word that I actually never heard before or didn't know what it meant. Merchantable.
Merchantable,
Is that
Sam.
Merchant.
Merchantable, exactly.
It's an extension of the word merchant.
It is.
Merchantable.
Exactly. That's what a merchant does. He offers a good or service to the marketplace.
I've learned something today. You've taught me something. Merchantable. I'm going to bring that into the next conversation I have.
Sounds like a stage show, doesn't it?
Yes, merchantable. That's extraordinary. Well, Brian, so you're healthy and you took a bit of a belting. I got a feeling during the journey from all this, and you're back on top of things, or is that not right?
I think I was.
You did it on a bit, as they say.
Ably supported by my wife and family.
Yes,
and the other thing that we hadn't mentioned at our meetings that we had, I was determined that. Quite often, in the union sense, the people would go to a meeting and then they would come home. Well, wouldn't come home straight away. They'd probably go to somewhere where they could wet their whistle. And then by the time they got home, if the rest of the family wanted to know what was going on, they said, look, I've been talking about it all day. And I was determined that when we had our large meetings that we did, that the wives, the families, next door neighbours, if they like, could come along as well, so that when they got home, if they wanted to talk about it and think about, what they should be doing or shouldn't be doing, then they had someone to talk to about it. And I think that was one of the reasons why, if you can say it was successful, but that's one of the ways, that's one of the reasons I think that pilots and their families stuck together so well.
So I was just going to say, did you lay the foundations for this never to happen again, or is it always on the cards that the pilots or the Federation will take industrial action again, or are they on a pretty good wicket now?
Oh, look, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about
anything,
pilots or anything.
Yep. We always want more.
There's always, businesses always want to make more money or get more money. That's reasonable. Investors, shareholders want to get more, and so do the people working there. So it's a battle of, or hopefully a conference where people can do as well as they can without significantly adversely affecting other people.
Well, thank heavens Mr. Joyce has scurried back to Ireland.
Oh, good riddance to the leprechaun. Absolutely. That's the
Thank you,
Australian
John.
public talking.
Thank you, John. when he graffitied all our Qantas planes with the yes/no vote. Anyhow,
Well, that worked, didn't
it? That worked well. Yeah, he scarpered back to where he came from. Him and his husband. Him and his husband, Mr. and Mr. Joyce. Bryan MacCarthy, thank you very much for coming in. I know it's, as I say, 35 years ago it happened, but it was a huge national chaotic scene in the industrial relations world, and you were front and square in it. And you're not a socialist, are you?
No.
Might be. No. That's what union leaders call, don't they? If they stick up for their mates. It wouldn't matter if you were, incidentally. It wouldn't matter if you weren't a man. It wouldn't matter if you were sitting there and you were a trans person. It's great to have you in here. Thank you very much. Bryan MacCarthy, who was the former president of the Australian Federation of Air Pilots, not airline pilots, air pilots. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Thank you, Sam. Pleasure.
And thank you, John Locke.
Thank you, Sam.
That's it.